The red and blue flashes from 3 patrol cars danced across my windshield as I pulled into the gravel driveway of my lake cabin. The pit in my stomach grew heavier with every second. My pickup truck was surrounded by uniformed officers, their flashlights sweeping over the now empty truck bed. Just 2 hours earlier, it had been packed to the brim with groceries, camping gear, and construction supplies worth more than $2,000. And right beside them, arms folded across her chest like a self-appointed queen, stood Patricia Greenwood, the infamous HOA president from across the road. She wore her signature power suit like it was a badge of authority, even on a warm Saturday afternoon. Her hair was perfectly styled, not a strand daring to move in the lakeside breeze. "There he is, officers," she announced in that grating nasal voice of hers, pointing directly at me like I was public enemy number 1. "That's the man who's been stealing from our community. I caught him red-handed with stolen goods. I've already secured the evidence." One of the officers, a tall man with sergeant stripes stitched on his sleeve, gave me a puzzled look. "Sir, are you the owner of this property?" "Yes, officer," I said evenly, forcing my voice to stay calm, even though I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "This is my cabin. I inherited it from my uncle 6 months ago. And that truck is mine too, registered in my name. I bought all those supplies this morning from Costco and Home Depot. I've still got every receipt." Patricia's face flushed a blotchy purple. "He's lying," she barked. "This property belongs to the Maple Grove HOA. I've been president for 8 years. I know every inch of this neighborhood. He's been squatting here, hoarding supplies, probably running some kind of illegal operation." The truth was, this mess had been building up for weeks. 3 weeks earlier, I'd started making weekend trips to restore Uncle Frank's old cabin. The place sat on 2 acres of quiet lakefront outside the official boundary of the Maple Grove subdivision. The very first time I drove past Patricia's house with a truck full of lumber and tools, she practically sprinted down her front steps in her high heels. "Excuse me," she called, waving her arms as she jogged toward my window. "Where exactly do you think you're going with all that?" Trying to be polite, I stopped and rolled my window down. "Just heading up to my cabin. I'm fixing it up on weekends." Her eyes narrowed like she'd just smelled something rotten. "What cabin?" "There are no approved structures beyond this point. Everything past Elm Street is under HOA jurisdiction. And I certainly haven't approved any construction." That was the day I learned Patricia Greenwood lived in a fantasy world where her HOA powers stretched as far as her ego allowed. I'd shown her my property deed, and even a certified surveyor's map clearly marking the HOA boundary a/4 mile before my cabin, but she'd waved it off like I was showing her a fake ID. "Maps can be forged," she'd scoffed. "I'll be keeping an eye on you." And she did. Every Friday evening, like clockwork, Patricia would be standing at the edge of her property with a pair of binoculars in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She photographed my truck, scribbled notes like some kind of suburban detective, and hollered invasive questions about my supplies. "Awful lot of canned goods for one person," she yelled one night as I carried boxes of water and non-perishables inside. "What's the plan? Bunker down for the apocalypse? Or maybe running an illegal Airbnb?" I tried ignoring her, but she didn't know the meaning of the word. She left fake violation notices on my windshield, called the county inspector to complain about unpermitted construction, only to be told the cabin was outside her jurisdiction. She even tried rallying her neighbors to form a watch group to monitor my property like I was some kind of outlaw. Things really boiled over the Friday before all this. I'd made my biggest supply run yet. Winter was coming, and I wanted the cabin stocked and ready. The truck bed was loaded with a generator, propane tanks, canned goods, blankets, tools, and a brand new chainsaw. More than $2,000 worth of gear. Patricia, as usual, stood sentry. But this time, she walked straight into the road and threw up a hand, forcing me to stop. "This is getting ridiculous," she said, peering into my truck bed with naked greed. "No legitimate cabin owner needs this much stuff. You're either hoarding, dealing drugs, or up to something illegal. I'm giving you one last warning before I take official action." I sighed. Official action for what? Buying groceries? Maintaining my own property? "Patricia, you have no authority here. The HOA boundary ends at Elm Street. My cabin is half a mile past that." She gave a cold, triumphant smile. "We'll see about that. The board is voting next week to extend our jurisdiction to include all properties accessed through our roads. Once it passes, you'll need HOA approval for every nail you hammer." I didn't bother explaining to her that HOAs can't just annex private property by taking a vote. I was tired. It was late. I had work to do, so I drove on, leaving her standing there in the road, already plotting whatever came next. The next morning, I woke early and spent hours installing new shelving in the storage room. Around noon, I decided to grab lunch in town and pick up a few more things from the hardware store. I left my truck in the driveway half full of supplies I hadn't unloaded yet. That was my mistake. I underestimated just how far Patricia would go. When I returned 2 hours later and saw the flashing lights, the empty truck bed, and Patricia's smug face, everything clicked into place. While the sergeant questioned me, I pulled out my phone and opened my security camera app. After Patricia's first harassment attempts, I'd installed cameras around the cabin just in case. "Officers," I said, scrolling through the footage with my thumb, "I think I can clear this up real quick. Here, take a look at this." The timestamp on my phone read, and the footage left no room for doubt. Patricia's white Lexus rolled right into my driveway like she owned the place. She stepped out, glancing around with a nervous, twitchy energy. Then one by one, she started hauling my supplies from the truck and loading them into her car. It took her 6 trips. 6 trips to clear out everything I'd bought that morning. The security cameras captured every second in crisp high-definition clarity. Her license plate, her face flushed with effort as she wrestled with the heavier boxes. There was no misunderstanding here. She had stolen my property. The sergeant's expression changed as he watched the footage. Confusion melted into sharp understanding and then hardened into anger. He turned slowly toward Patricia. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and controlled, "you told our dispatcher that you witnessed this man stealing these items from your neighbors. You said you made a citizen's arrest and secured the stolen goods as evidence." Patricia's smug mask slipped. "Well, he was obviously lying about owning them," she stammered. "Look at all that stuff. Normal people don't buy in bulk like that unless they're doing something illegal." The sergeant's jaw tightened. "So, you took it upon yourself to remove items from his truck on his property and claim them as evidence of a crime you invented?" His voice was so quiet it was more dangerous than a shout. "I was protecting the community," Patricia snapped, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "He's been flaunting HOA regulations for weeks, hauling suspicious cargo, refusing to submit property plans, ignoring my notices." "Ma'am," another officer cut in firmly, "we've already confirmed this property isn't part of your HOA. County records are crystal clear. You had no right to touch anything on this land, let alone take property from his vehicle." I pulled up the receipts on my phone and handed them to the sergeant. 20237 Costco and Home Depot. Bought this morning. Timestamps match. He gave a curt nod before turning to his team. Jenkins Rodriguez, escort Miss Greenwood to her residence and retrieve the stolen property. "Ma'am, you're going to return every single thing you took." Patricia's face went from red to pale to blotchy pink in seconds. "Stolen? I didn't steal anything." I was securing evidence. I'm the HOA president. I have authority. Not here. You don't. The sergeant cut her off sharply. What you have is a very real problem. Taking someone else's property is theft. Making a false 911 report is a crime. You're looking at potential charges for both. The next hour was pure satisfaction. I followed the police convoy to Patricia's immaculate house, where my supplies were stacked inside her garage, like they belonged to her. Her husband opened the door, and his face drained of color as the officers laid out the situation. He kept darting horrified looks at Patricia, mumbling apologies to me and the officers. She, meanwhile, tried every excuse she could grasp at. She claimed she was protecting the neighborhood. She said she thought the cabin was abandoned. She insisted she believed the supplies were stolen goods. She even threw in some nonsense about HOA bylaws granting her emergency powers. But none of it mattered. Each excuse landed like a flat note, and the officers remained stone-faced as they supervised the return of every last box. "Every item goes back," the sergeant said firmly when Patricia tried to argue over a box of canned goods, claiming it looked like something stolen from a neighbor. "Unless you can prove ownership, it all goes back where you took it from." By now, neighbors had gathered at the end of the driveway, drawn by the flashing lights and rising tension. I recognized several HOA board members among them. Their expressions told the whole story: embarrassment, frustration, and anger. It was clear this wasn't the first time Patricia had gone overboard. But this time, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. As the last box was loaded into my truck, the sergeant flipped open his citation book and turned to Patricia. "Miss Greenwood," he said flatly, "I'm citing you for theft of property valued over $2,000. That's a felony in this state. You're also being cited for making a false emergency report and misuse of 911 services." Patricia's knees seemed to give out beneath her. She slumped against her Lexus, her perfect composure finally shattering. "A felony? But I'm the HOA president. I was trying to help. This is all a misunderstanding. You can explain that to the judge," the sergeant replied. "The prosecutor will decide whether to pursue the felony or reduce it to a misdemeanor. Either way, you're looking at serious fines and possible jail time." One of the board members, Janet, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense tone, stepped forward. "Patricia," she said, her voice icy, "we're calling an emergency board meeting tonight. Your actions have exposed the HOA to liability and humiliated this community. I'll be moving for your immediate removal as president." The final blow came moments later when another officer returned from running Patricia's record. "Ma'am," he said, "this isn't your first offense. 2 prior citations for false reporting and 1 for harassment. The prosecutor's going to see a pattern here." Patricia's face crumpled completely. Whatever haughty posture she'd carried for years dissolved as she mumbled something about needing her lawyer and stumbled toward the house. Her husband was left behind to finish the paperwork with the officers, his expression somewhere between shame and exhaustion. The sergeant handed me his card. "You'll need to come by the station on Monday to file a full report. Given the value of the theft and her history, she's facing serious consequences. Just the felony theft charge alone can carry up to 5 years in prison and fines up to $10,000. From the doorway, Patricia let out a strangled wail. 5 years? $10,000? Her voice cracked as the weight of reality crushed her. Then she vanished inside, the door slamming behind her with a sound that felt final, like the closing of a chapter. Her reign as the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA was over.